mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. I'm only here to even a score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
What up, Night Nation, and welcome to another episode of The Knighted Ones. It is episode number 81. As a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst and hoops player, an infamous rapper, a resident influencer and IG star, shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. Remember to like and follow us on YouTube, IG, Twitter, Instagram, all the things, and make sure you're checking out our content on the Big 12 Huddle. All right, so it's a great week because football season, we are 5 practices in, which means we're getting closer and closer and closer to the season. There's a plethora of new players on the field, and we've got a little bit of inside info on how that looked. And remember, we have an upcoming practice as well in scrimmage that you'll be able to attend this Friday. So make sure you're checking that out. We're going to ask some big questions this week and do a little self-reflection and say, where is UCF as a P5 program right now? And I say program because I don't mean team. I mean as a program. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some new recruits that have come through our doors. So super exciting about that. We'll also talk about our pivot poll, a little UCF hoops, who's in the portal, who's not, what does that mean, etc. We'll talk UCF baseball and all of the other sports that Alan does not watch. So we're excited about that, had some success there, and we're excited to share that with you. So without further ado, let me bring our producer and hair extraordinaire to the stage. What up, Nobra?
Hey now. I like
hey
that.
Now. All right, so this is the guy, everyone, that you have to thank for those amazing timestamps. He actually watches the show back and has to manually do that every week. So thank you, Nobra. Let's get that patented hair flip. All right, next to the stage, someone who needs no introduction, but we'll give one to him anyway, our resident IG star, Alan Levin. Welcome to the show, brother.
What's going on, guys? How are you?
Good. Glad to have you back.
Glad
we almost had you out last week. By the way, we did give you props for doing the show notes despite not being able to make the show because of the whole illness situation going on. So we appreciate everything that you do. And last but not least, but always last, Josh Lazar.
Until Alan scooped in like 2 seconds before the pod. This is great. I thought I was waiting to come on. And since Roger has this behind the scenes that I don't see, I'm like, that's not me. So it's all good.
Here's the good news. It doesn't matter when you slide in as long as you slide in, right? That's the important part.
Jeez, man. What is it's starting off early. And I do like this hat. I do like that.
I won't say that I didn't have any of that citronella juice before we started the show. That being said, speaking of my hat, I'm going to be featuring one of the 3 for the next 3 weeks. I'm going to be featuring each new one of my Canaveral blue hats. If you have been looking for them like I did, the bookstore across from the arena actually has all 3 of the Canaveral blue hats that are out this year. So if you're looking for them, go get them. They do have one that's fitted. They have the Nike ones too. I just don't like them as much as the new Era hats. So welcome to the show, everybody. We have football to talk about. I know Alan's excited because he doesn't care about any other sport except for football and maybe a little bit of basketball. But so let's start off there. We had some new additions to UCS football program. And why don't you run us through the 2 commitments for the 2026 class?
Yeah, well, we doubled our class from 2 to 4 in the last 3-4 days here. So, we start off the class with 2 linebackers that committed earlier this month, and then we obviously had one in January. But the first commitment was over on the 27th. Keyshawn Charlton guy, our first non-Florida verbal commit of the class, coming out of Brunswick, Georgia. So get a guy from the Peach State, which is very common for UCF. He's currently ranked a 3-star, depending on what outlet you look at. But big dude, 6'7", 295 pounds as he enters his senior year at Brunswick High. Has gotten several looks from Power 5 schools. Mostly group of fives, but he did get an offer from Tennessee, which is pretty big SEC offer, as well as West Virginia and Indiana, and a few other group of five schools. So he's starting to generate a little bit more interest as the months pass. It's a guy that is kind of growing into his role, just became a starter over at Brunswick in the last year. But obviously with that starting role has generated a lot more buzz in recruiting circles. So we'll see, according to Rivals, he is a top 100 player in Georgia, as well as considered a top 100 offensive tackle in the nation. So UCF could always use more big uglies. Obviously, we've been relying on the transfer portal a lot when it comes to offensive line in the past 3, 4, 5 years. So always good to get some more offensive line talent. So that was the first commit. Then the other commit that just committed a couple of days ago was Elijah Keys, yet another defensive back. Obviously, Coach Frost went really hard in the paint when it comes to DBs in the transfer portal, but also in the high school class. So this is our first corner commit, our first defensive back commit of the 2026 class. Another Florida kid comes out of Neptune Beach, Florida at Duncan Fletcher High. Also a 3-star commit. Ranked fairly highly, though, in the state. He's top 125 in the state of Florida, according to 247, as well as Rivals, and is a top 100 corner in the country. Still needs to put some weight on, 6'2", 170 pounds, but it seems to be also growing and developing over the past year. Fletcher is a 6A program, and he was all conference honors last year, so had his best year as a high school player in 2024. So also has a fairly extensive offer list with 16 offers. Not too many P5 or P4s, just Pittsburgh, South Carolina, and us are the only other offers.
Hold on. Just South Carolina of the SEC and, Pittsburgh, who we've been battling with for the last, umpteen years, probably the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, Sincere Edwards, for example, who went he was a commitment here, and we lost him to Pitt, and he's back on the roster. So, the other thing too, you mentioned the Georgia pipeline. The big thing that UCF has always done well in Georgia is offensive linemen. And the 2017 years, previous George O'Leary years, we've always done really, really well with offensive linemen. This kid's 6'7", 295, and I looked at pictures of him. He's not like overly heavy, right? So he's lean for a lineman, which means that he has plenty of room to put some weight on for that frame. But Elijah Keys, he's kind of one of those under the radar kind of guys, those borderline 4-star type guys. As you mentioned, with regard to corners, I think we had 23 on the roster, and then now him as a commitment. But it sounds like a lot, especially if we have 108 players. But if you go through and compare what the defensive backs look like for P4 programs, that's about right. It's one of the areas that has some of the most turnover, but it's also one of the areas that you need some strengths in, especially considering that our play last year. What I'm really looking for, though, is how these guys are coached up, right? So are they playing the ball? Or are they playing the body, which is the biggest complaint that we had from last year? But Yeah, I'm actually. Listen. As many offensive linemen that we can get from Georgia, I'm all on board. And he's actually one that was waiting on an offer from UCF, so that's exciting as well. What are you guys' thoughts on these two guys? I know they're 3 stars. We've been used to 4 stars, lately. But Frost said he was looking less for that and looking more for guys that are going to fit the program and want to be here. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with these recruiting classes.
Yeah, I was gonna say the reality is that if you're hearing any of the chatter coming out from, well, not even just coming out from these practices, but from the coaches themselves, getting people who mesh well together is going to be a big piece of this puzzle. And I think the goal here is getting the best talent we can who will make our locker room a positive place versus stars and the A++ players that are $500,000 to $2 million straight from high school. I feel like we're going to have a mix, but thinking culture first, maybe with an and of can do the work or can be built into doing the work, is going to be what we're doing. A little bit more diamond mining like you're talking about. I like it. I mean, there are so, and I don't want to go too off. There are so many things about collegiate athletics that the general fan who's been around for 20 plus years is not too happy with. Perhaps at least trying to build culture while in the nil era and see if that breeds results. And yes, the people who are really good are going to have to be paid to stick around or will walk. But let's try this, because the star hunting versus diamond mining has not helped us in a while, nil or no nil. So I love this because it feels like they're trying to bring in people that will bring the proper culture and can be built into the O linemen and the corners and the defense and the offense we're looking for.
So, Alan, you look at a lot of these guys from the recruiting perspective. You've done this for years. I have too, but not to the extent that you do. What do you see from these two guys that either make you say meh or hey, these are good pickups?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I do think they're good pickups. I don't really feel that they're diamond mining at all. I mean, these are both 3-star guys, and I also think they haven't received a lot of attention just because, for example, the offensive lineman just kind of became a starter. And you're starting to see, I mean, yeah, the 4 and 5-star guys start getting offers as a sophomore or even a freshman, but typically,
or if you're in LSU, it's 8th grade.
True. So, yeah, I mean, so, I think the recruits we're going to get are going to be somewhere in between Frost's first go around here and what Coach Malzahn was getting on paper. So I think, like you said, it's all about the development and, how quickly that happens and how much effort is placed on that. And that's something Frost talked about in his interview with Mark Daniels when he first sat down, that he wanted to build this the right way and rely a lot on development. Yes, he's going to, plug in, play some transfer guys when needed, but, he's going to develop these guys. So, I mean, as it pertains to these two recruits, I think they look good. I think the offensive lineman was a little bit raw from what I saw, but the DB, I mean, was already pretty 6'2" already as a junior, maybe could grow some more, looks to be really athletic. So, and I like the schools that they both came from and the areas that they're coming from, both big programs in their respective areas. So I think they're good pickups. I mean, it's not flashy like some of the booms that Coach Malzahn got, but that's fine. I mean, I don't think it has to be that way. I mean, I'd rather we weren't, like we talked about a million times on the show, they weren't getting developed. They weren't playing. They were all that flash for essentially nothing outside of a few, standouts like John Walker and a couple other guys. So I'd rather go this route if it means there's development. It's not like these guys are scrubs. I mean, they're mid to high 3-star talents.
Yeah. And let me just be real clear, because there are some old heads, if you will, in the chat and watching live and maybe in post. I'm not talking about like Bruce Miller 2-star. What the heck did that become in college diamond mining? That's a whole different perspective than what like the people we are getting access to now were probably relatively unattainable back then for the most part. Not completely, but for the most part. So I'm meaning more of a, okay, this is now we are Power 5. We can get access to not diamonds in the rough like that, but people who have the ability to be developed versus, like you say, like the Gus Malzahn era. So I just want to make sure I'm not saying that we're getting that level diamond mining, but I do think taking someone from a 3-star that has some things that might be rough around the edges, if you will, and building them into a skilled athlete that has the ability to go out in the market and make way more money than they did as a freshman or out of high school might be what we're feeling. That's my opinion.
Well, I think the biggest part about this is, and we'll talk about this a little bit. I think that one of the things that people like Sean Beckton bring to the table, right? You hear a lot about technique, right? You hear a lot about technique, and we'll talk about him a little bit later because he was mic'd up this week and he had an interview. And I think it was telling because some of the wide receivers were also DJ Black and a few of the other receivers were also interviewed this week. And a lot of what they talked about is getting back to the basics, right? Really that George O'Leary kind of mindset, making sure we're looking at technique, making sure we're paying attention to the details, block, no block, no rock. You know, the stuff we were talking about last season that was missing from last season's team. So these guys who are these 3-star, 4-star guys, borderline 4-star guys, to your point, Josh, these aren't borderline 3-stars, right? These are borderline 4-stars. And the offensive lineman, to what you said, Alan, he's got the raw talent, right? If he's just starting this past year and he's already garnering that much attention with his size and his frame and what he can do there, if he gets the time, another year of offensive line, and then comes into the system, I think they're looking at these guys that we're bringing in now. I hate to break it to everyone here, and I think everybody knows this, but we're not going undefeated this season, right? I was talking to Trey. I was talking to Trey about this, right? It's like
foul. That's a foul. No.
Yeah, exactly.
15.
Exactly. I was telling everybody, you know, in the group chat, right, as well, that what we should be going for here for this season is kind of like what we saw in Frost's first year when he was here in 2016, right? It's looking for the splashes, looking for the those glints of the future and what they could be, right? This year is about building. This year is about getting those pieces in there. So I think what they're looking for in these high school kids we want them to stick around in the system for a couple of years before they either potentially decide to move on or stick around with us. That way we can forge that bond culturally, which it's completely different. And we'll talk about that in just a second when we talk about what we saw or what was seen in the shareholders scrimmage, the very first scrimmage of the season, and what the differences were on how practices run, what we're doing culturally, how we're communicating to the players, when they screw up. There was a pretty heated interaction at the scrimmage between the offensive line and the D line. How was that handled? Et cetera. And everything that you're hearing from everybody is that Gus Malzahn just was not organized. He was all over the place and he was too easy. I don't know if he was just used to leaning on his coaching staff, because one of the things, I have some Auburn contacts, several Auburn contacts actually, and former players and former coaches there. And one of the things Coach Malzahn did was he pushed everything on. He was not a hands-on type of coach. So Scott Frost is being different, and we'll talk about some of those differences in the next segment here. So speaking of that segment, there was the first scrimmage of the season after 5 practices in. That was for shareholders only. So this wasn't open to the general public. That scrimmage will be open on Friday. I encourage everyone to go and visit. Some of the things that I'm hearing as far as standouts, the QB position is obviously something that we're all thinking about, right? Let's be real. Steven Jackson is the leader in the clubhouse, right? He was brought here for a reason. However, Cam Fancher, who came from, was it FIU or FIU? FAU. Yeah, FAU seems to be lighting it up in practice and also did pretty well in the scrimmage. So you've kind of got this separation that's going on right now between Cam Fancher and Jackson and the rest of the quarterbacks, right? So Dylan Risk, obviously, he had a prominent role at UCF last year, but it seems like he's in that second tier of the quarterbacks from what I'm understanding. Now, again, it's early, right? The video that we're seeing is people throwing passes that can't get hit, but they're still learning the offense. But it seems like Cam Fancher is making a name for himself early, as is Jackson. If Jackson does not end up being the starting quarterback when we start football season at the end of August, and Cam Fancher is the starting quarterback, that means that we've kind of punted the football to me, to the next season, whoever we're bringing into that high school recruiting class. What do you guys think about that?
I like someone being pushed, right? I mean, I'm excited to see competition, right? You're probably right. Jackson's probably it. But if someone, I think, if someone really rises to the occasion, probably not Risk, unfortunately, but if someone rises to the occasion, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility to go, well, we did spend this money. We have a really expensive backup, right? I just feel like that is at least what is coming in the messaging from Frost, right? I agree with you. I'm pretty sure we know who the starting quarterback is, but regardless of that, now you can't rest on your laurels. And I'm not saying that's what KJ Jefferson did, but you're getting pushed. And truth be told, KJ was possibly being pushed in camp last year.
Bro, the only thing he was being pushed into was the Waffle House after game day.
I know. I saw him
out there. That was it, bro.
No,
he was getting extra crab cakes at Red Lobster. He was checked out. It wasn't happening.
I agree, and I feel like so. The answer to me, I like hearing this. I like hearing people being pushed. I think we need more of that in other areas. I think quarterback probably happening, running back probably happening, but we probably know who's starting there. Wide receiver is a great case in point. We might talk about that in a bit. We need to figure out, was it no one who has had a catch last year is on this team or darn near close? Like there are some things we just need to figure out, but regarding quarterbacks, I like the fact that people are in there and having a competition. Period in a statement. And I know it's spring. Hold on. I need to read.
Tim, you're 100% correct, which is why I said that. Like all we're getting is 5-second clips, right? And a situation where they're not going to be showing a lot of the play, so we don't know what it would look like. But what we're saying is okay, fast forward. If it is Cam Fancher versus Jackson, then are we sitting this one out basically, right? And I don't know. I hope Cam Fancher surprises me. Yeah. But I don't know, man. I don't know.
And worst case scenario, like look at Risk. Risk did a pretty darn good job coming in when he had to and taking over as best as he could, as green as he was. He was one really bad call /throw, maybe two in Arizona State from having a shot at winning that game. And they weren't a slouch of a team, as we all know. Yes, I know Scadaboo wasn't in the game. I was there. But let's just forget about that part. But that's what we also need that, right? If we need someone to come in and take over, I want someone who is pushing the starting quarterback. So, and I know it's not going to be Ja'Cory Brown from everything I read.
Well, I mean, look, reality is Ja'Cory, it's just not
a tight end.
Well, I mean, yes, but he's not going to do that. And like, I like Ja'Cory. He's stuck with us, like whatever.
Yeah.
I wanted him to do well.
Yes.
He's got the ability to make some crazy things happen. The problem is he's running back 50 yards when he's doing it. The other thing is that was a little with Dylan, and I hope he makes another step forward this season, right? Because I'm not hating on anybody, but the last two games, part of it was the offensive line, part of it was people, I think honestly given up on the season. They were looking towards the future, but the flip side of it was some of that decision making was not great. So,
Right.
Alan, what do you think?
So I think still when you talk about the QB battle in April, March, it's still too early to say anything. Like I think who the favorites most times going into each season are at quarterback. There's very few times where it's like a major surprise. Like the last major surprise I can maybe remember is like when Pete DeNovo was named starter instead of Justin Coleman. But
Pete DeNovo.
Oh,
yeah. That was we were all shocked by that. Going
hey,
into
listen,
let
me say this about Pete DeNovo. On Nightline, he used to come on all the time, and he was actually a good guest on Nightline after his playing was over, and he showed us his notebook of squirrels. But
it's no hate on him.
Let's get him back on.
Surprise, but I don't. I still think Ja'Cory has a chance. I mean, just being that he is mobile, but he's probably third in the pecking order. I just wouldn't count out risk. I think when the fact that he's been in the program, has the most starts under his belt of any QB on the roster, essentially, I guess outside of Ja'Cory at Miami, but in general has the most starts. Well, actually, now I think about Fancher, actually has the most starts, but at least as at UCF, Risk has the most starts, right? But I think, we know who the favorite is. But I think calling anything now or even saying like, oh, Fancher is, pushing him and all that. Sure, he may be doing that, but I think we really can't get much. And like, as we know, like you said, Roger, I think that they're showing the clips we're seeing are, basically throws that they're not going to reveal anything that's actually substantial. It's going to be, very mild highlights basically. So I think it's a little too early to call, but I think we know who the top two are. But I wouldn't count out Risk completely. I think there is the fact that he's been in the program the longest of any quarterback on the roster. And, being that he's going to be a third or fourth year player, I think there's a chance that he could continue.
But what advantage does he have? Like his advantage goes out the window because he's not been in the system. Right. So like that's yeah, exactly.
Has anyone been in Frost system though?
No, but that's my point. That's my point. Like any advantage that he gets for having started at UCF, I think that goes away because of that. Tim makes a great point here. He says QB is important, but if the O-line is giving lookout blocks, Roger will be called to start at QB. Probably. I have a noodle arm now. I'm 43 years old. So I don't know if I can make it past 30 yards on a across. I shouldn't be passing across the field anyway, but I'd be lucky if I could make a solid pass at 30 yards passing across the field. So on my 40-yard dash, Trey keeps wanting to race me for the 40-yard dash. And I keep saying, dude, you are so much younger than me. There's no way you should win that. Right. So that being said, to your point though,
Beavers and Ben. There you go.
Me and Ben. Ben makes up for it in the strides. The length of his stride.
We should do that one day.
Oh my God.
I will be last so easily.
But look,
Okay.
at the end of the day, like when we're talking about QB, right, and offensive line is going to be a super important part of this. We don't know what we have. The stalwarts of the offensive line are gone. We do have a few, like for those of you who don't know, I'm half German, so I could speak to our German offensive linemen, right? That everybody made fun of for, well, we're reaching to
5
go
years?
get, huh?
For 5 years.
I know, but the fact
He's
is
doing
he's the
great.
starter now. And, at the end of the day, offensive line is going to be a key part of this. And right now, from what I'm told, is as we expect, it's spring. There's a lot of guys that are coming in that are new. The defense is definitely ahead of the offense, as they should be, and the offensive line specifically. So it takes a while to mesh, and we haven't had consistency on offensive line for a while. Even the starters that we had went out with injury quite a bit. And if you're a QB, if you don't know what the tendencies are going to be for your offensive line, or they're not a solid offensive line, then yeah, you're going to have problems. But some of the stuff that I saw from Risk at the end there just make me think he's not the QB of the future. And I do think it'll be either Fancher or Jackson. All right, some of the other guys that stood out at the practice. Obviously, you'd expect Miles Montgomery to do that. He absolutely continues to be who we expect him to be, and that's your starting running back for UCF football. Running back Jaden Nixon, though, also seemed to be a little bit of a standout. Grant Stevens, huh?
I said no surprise there. He looked real good last year. He had a breakout season last year at Western Michigan.
Well, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, Jaden Nixon, I think we know the void that RJ Harvey obviously left by departing for the pros. And we've all acknowledged, I think, that we still have talent in the room, but there wasn't a ton of experience really outside of Miles Montgomery. And even him, he played sparingly at Cincinnati. And then he had a pretty extensive injury history last season where he played, 6, maybe 7 games, and obviously was behind RJ. But even behind Penny Boone at times in certain games. So there wasn't a lot of experience. While there was a lot of talent and potential, just not a ton of experience. So I think getting Jaden Nixon was a big pickup. I mean, he dominated at Western Michigan. He was kind of in a similar situation to what we've seen at UCF with other running backs, where he was very talented, but he sat behind Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State. So he got pretty much no playing time. But at Western Michigan, he was all MAC first team, had just over 1,000 yards. I think he had like 13 or 14 touchdowns. Real speedster, looked really good. He was elusive. He broke a lot of tackles last year. I think he was number 2 in breaking tackles in the MAC conference. So I'm excited about him. Him being able to take the step up to P4 is no surprise, considering right out of high school, he was a P4 player at Oklahoma State and had multiple offers. He's from Texas, had offers from multiple Texas schools and other P4 schools in the Big 12. So him looking good in practice does not surprise me. I think he's ready for the moment.
Well, I agree with you there. And I think that's something that people forget. A lot of times these guys take a path where they take a step back before they take a step forward back into the spotlight, right? And I think that's definitely the case for Jaden Nixon. It's a name that you should kind of keep an eye on. Another name that's been big and that we're expecting a lot from was Burdell Richardson. So Burdell Richardson has all the talent in the world. That dude, he absolutely can grab any pass that he's got the circus catches. He's got all this stuff. The problem with Burdell Richardson, and the longer it's kind of gone along, we were wondering, why didn't he step into the starting lineup or at least have a role with the twos last year? And one of the things that our OG coach kind of pointed out was that he doesn't go 100 miles an hour all the time. He takes plays off, right? And so that's okay under Gus Malzahn, but that's not okay with this current coaching staff, right? And so if we've all been wondering, where's Burdell? Like, where does he fit in this? Why is he not getting more playing time, again, especially after the spring game and all of that, right?
Blame Gus.
As it turns out, or the spring last year, as it turns out, it looks like he's got some maturity that he needs to go, because as we said earlier, we are back to no block, no rock, right? And Burdell Richardson's going to learn pretty fast that if he wants to crack the starting lineup, because he's got all the talent in the world, that he's going to do that. And he was called out in an interview. So we're hoping to see him do that. You've got the thing for Burdell Richardson, though, and I want everybody to understand, we've got 4 really good receivers that we could start pretty much at any one of the positions, right? DJ Black is one of them. You heard me mention him earlier. This guy's a top-level receiver with experience that came to us from Miami, right? And he seems to be standing out at practice and doing the things the way they need to be done at UCF. So I want Burdell to do well because I see the talent in what he has. I don't want him to end up like another Goldie Lawrence or something like that, where he doesn't have the drive behind it, because again, he showed in this scrimmage that he has the talent.
Yeah. All I was going to say is this, and this makes a heck of a lot more sense. And I'm glad Coach Beck's kind of publicly did this, and I'm sure there was a lot of purpose behind that type of name drop in that way. So the times I was at practice last year, Burdell was picking balls off of corner routes. Well, yeah, I think they were corner routes. There was a lot of route trees, but what he was doing acrobatically in the air was phenomenal. And this is why most of the people who watched practice last year went, where the is Burdell when the season is breaking down? We're already, 4-7, whatever. And now this makes more sense. If you take he's an adult, but still a kid to most of us, right? If you take a young adult and put him in an environment where he is not challenged and he is not pushed, and you're just relying on pure talent, you only have you have 2 options: you sink or swim. And it might be we didn't see Burdell because he wasn't putting in the work, because he wasn't being pushed to put in the work, and blank. And we had some good receivers. So
Burdell Richardson, the biggest analog that I could point out as far as talent is concerned is Traquan Smith.
Yeah. And Traquan put in the work. Like guess who
his wide receiver coach was?
Beckton.
Right?
Yeah, but that's and this is my hope, is that he sees it. He sees the potential like we all do, and he's leveraging, like, this is one of his pieces of leverage to call him out publicly and see what happens. And truthfully, we all want to see him succeed. I'm sure, hopefully,
right, because his talent is there. It's huge.
There.
He's a phenomenal talent.
Yes, he could be wide receiver 1 or 2.
Wide receiver 1. Burdell Richardson. Okay, look, hot take. If he gets his stuff together, he will be wide receiver 1, and he will make it to the NFL before his career's over in a UCF uniform.
I don't think that's as much of a hot take. If he does what he's supposed to do, he's getting 1,000 yards this season. Perhaps, depends on how run heavy we go. But like, he has the ability to replace the production of Kobe or others in the past. And I'm hoping this will help.
Better talent-wise, he's better than Kobe.
I think so. I've seen it, but now I'm glad we got that nugget from that conversation, because that answers the why we have all had as fans who have seen this in practice, because none of us understood. We didn't see, was he on the bad side of Gus or our crew? No, he wasn't doing what he needed to be doing, and hopefully that changes soon.
And this is the same kid. Remember, one of the things he did his freshman year when he moved into campus, everything he was doing was on YouTube. And what he was doing was he was going in, he was showing, what he was doing at field work, working after hours, all of this stuff. So it's in direct contrast to what we're being told. And so it's not the work that he's putting in off the field. It's the work that he's putting in while he's on the field that's causing him to miss opportunities. So this, if he's smart, he'll look back at all of the receivers that UCF has put into the NFL and look at them and compare them. Who was that coach? What did they do? They taught him fundamentals and he pushed them, right? Coach Beck knows what's up. He was a successful receiver here. He's had NFL experience. He's done a great job with all that. And this is what drove me nuts when you had the whole when everybody was questioning why is he showing up at practice, and there was this whole thing, right? Coach Beck loves UCF, and he will push these receivers. He knows what to do to make them successful. Our receiver core is going to be better this year and next year than all 4 years under Gus Malzahn. The route trees are different. The type of routes that we're running in the scrimmage, there were more routes than what we were running before. The complexity of the routes, the fundamentals, the techniques, the ability to get out of your breaks, all of that stuff, and the drive to be successful is much better with Coach Beck at the helm. And a big reason for that is he loves UCF, and everybody understands and respects who Coach Beck is. He is the OG of this UCF coaching staff. He is a UCF Hall of Famer. He is a guy has put multiple receivers into the NFL, and he did that with the fundamentals and technique and be able to push people. And this was him calling Burdell out because Burdell has the talent to be that standout wide receiver, to be that NFL prospect, but he has to step up into his role and into his potential. Now, some other folks that were interesting that you wouldn't think. Tight end Caden Peening. We've heard a little bit about him. He was a pretty good recruit that came out of high school. Tight end Grant Stevens and wide receiver Caleb Rollerson. Alan, what do you know about Caleb?
Caleb who?
Rollerson.
Wallerson?
Rollerson. So clearly you don't know much about him.
I don't.
I didn't either. But he was one of the guys that was actually stepping up and stepping out at practice as well. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of the more familiar names that we know were also out there. And interviews this week for defensive end. Obviously we have Nigella Kelly coming back. And the expectations for the two starting defensive ends are out there. But Sincere Edwards was also making plays. So he made 2 plays in the scrimmage that were difference makers and stopped drives, right? So when you have someone like that, we all knew what Sincere Edwards was capable of. He had committed to us. He came back from Pitt, which to me is better because I get the vibe that he felt like he made the mistake. So he went up north, got his bag, and then came back to UCF. And he's going to be someone that you need to look at. He's definitely going to be in the 2s. He might get in with the 1s because he's a dominant player. He was dominant at Pitt as a freshman, and I expect him to be great here. So that's something to look for as well. All right. So a couple of things. Tim asked this question. I'm curious as to who is willing to step up and play on special teams. Okay. Special teams was a little bit special as far as kicking was concerned, right? So here's the thing. Remember, we've got other players that are coming in. We've got a new long snapper that's coming in. We've got some other kickers that are going to be coming in. Those aren't quite common knowledge that are out there, but expect a new kicker to come in as well to at least compete for the job. If the kicking performance that we had at the scrimmage holds true and continues to happen, we're going to be doing a lot of 2-point conversions, hopefully, this football season.
Ross doesn't mind that.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. But you got to at least keep him a little bit guessing, right? If you're going to run the 2-point conversion, you got to run the extra point every once in a while.
Fair.
We lost our longtime long snapper. We've had a good history. Charlie Hewitt, all these guys.
NFL long hours.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm serious. Our long snapping has been great for years, right? And we do have another long snapper that's going to be coming in after the spring. So I expect our special teams. I guess my point is when we're looking at special teams, it's not about who steps up; it's who we're bringing to the table after spring is over, because there will be some changes in special teams. Also, as it pertains to special teams, our coach, we have one of the best special teams coaches in the entire country who's now coaching our special teams. And that's all he does, right? He's a specialist in special teams. And so I expect that to get a lot better this year as well. And Tim says, Frost's big problem at Nebraska was kicking field goals when they are needed. He knows he has to get someone to kick it long and be accurate. 100% right. I think Scott Frost is abundantly aware of what his challenges were at Nebraska. Everybody, including Coach Beck, was talking about the growth that Scott Frost has had during this time and how he sees his growth even now as a head coach at UCF versus where he was when he started Nebraska and when he ended Nebraska and where he is today. Okay. One of the things that was pointed out as well from that practice, Scott Frost is not one, from a culture perspective, there were a few things that were hammered. Expectations, you hear it from every single coach, what the standard is. Now, when you're listening to interviews, what did we hear about standards for the past, 4 years or so, right? We heard them talk about standards, the UCF standard.
Yeah.
Every coach talks about this. The way that it's being talked about, the expectations that are set, the attention to detail, the no block, no rock, that didn't exist in the last 4 years. It just didn't. So as much as we talk about expectations and standards, it wasn't there because the coaches didn't drive accountability. If you came in and we were spending money on you, you were playing, right? And again, a lot of these NIL contracts, Miami was a perfect example. UF was a perfect example. They have it written into, and what was that kid? He transferred to FSU. I can't remember his name last year that stunk it up. He came from like Washington or Oregon State or something like that. Oh, we didn't hear you, Alan. Can you say that again?
You're talking about the quarterback?
Yeah.
DJ Ungle.
There you go. DJ Ungle, blah, blah, blah. All right.
What
guy,
you just said.
DJ, right?
Amazing.
So DJ, he actually had it written into his contract, and people were questioning, why is this guy continuing to play? Because it was written into his contract that unless he got injured, he would not sit on the bench. This is where we're at with NIL right now, right? So when you're thinking about these things, you're talking about these things, please remember that in consideration. But there was kind of like a little bit of a kerfuffle that came out between offense and defensive line, and he went back to the old school, and apparently there were some people that were running around hand in hand after practice to kind of handle that. And you've heard Trey talk about it. Trey's not on this week, but they had boxing gloves. And then there was a post-game speech where Scott Frost was really talking about, making sure that you're not letting each other down. You want to be competitive, but you don't want to be competitive with each other, right? Which is a little bit different than what we've heard before. They want support. He wants you to be vocal. He wants you to be supportive, but his whole mantra is it's not about the individual player. It's about the team. So you need to make sure, yes, you're fighting with that other guy across the trench, but it's not because you want your ego to be boosted and to get into fights and things like that. It's about being there for that other team member. So a lot of that conversation was about that. And it's different than what we've had at UCF in the past. It'll be really interesting to see what happens at the second scrimmage in front of everybody as well. One of the other things that was interesting was Dante Culpepper was on campus. So it's been a hot minute since we were flipping burgers off of University Boulevard. since
Oh,
Dante
God.
Culpepper has been back, right? So I wish that would have worked. I wish that would have worked out a little bit better for Dante because it brought him closer to the program when he was trying to promote the hamburger place that he had there. But I'm glad that he's back around the program. He's reclusive. It's not that he hates UCF. He just hasn't been around. He doesn't like the spotlight. He's a good dude, and it was so great to see him. RJ Harvey was back on campus. He was back on campus. Scott Frost is doing a really good job of trying to bring those guys back to campus. And Trey Neal will be on campus with the guys here over the next several weeks. In fact, we're going to be meeting up, and he's going to buy us a steak because he still owes me that from Nightline. But, that being said, he's going to go to some of these practices, and he'll share some of his insight, as he did last year. All right. Anything else that you guys want to talk about with regard to the spring and the scrimmage and the shareholder scrimmage and what you're looking for as far as that's concerned? Alan, anything from you?
Yeah,
No.
I'll say this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Coming right off. I'm really excited. I don't know what we're going to Tim's point in the chat. I don't know what we're going to see within that framework, right? Within the athletes and doing what they do, right? What we are going to see is what this version of Scott Frost's coaching looks like and how he's speaking with the team, who's available for interviews, all these different dynamics of what the team and the coaching specifically is going to be. So I'm excited to hear things that sound to me, which is relative lay person that has, it's not, Trey has forgotten more than I know about football, but it sounds like we're actually talking about fundamentals. It sounds like we're actually trying to teach, paid athletes, mostly paid athletes, to succeed. And it looks like we're getting back to the things that, happened during Georgia Leary, of course, happened during Frost version 1, probably happened a little bit more during Heupel, but maybe a little less because that route tree wasn't that diverse either. When you talk about wide receivers, so
it wasn't diverse at all.
I know, I was joking. So anyway, I feel like this is what we're going to learn. We might hear some rumblings about athletes, and we'll figure that out. But I think we're really going to learn how this team is going to be managed and structured to succeed. And it sounds like we're getting back to some of the old school things, quote unquote, that Frost and George O'Leary did, which I think combined with the money of nil will get the right people in the right places to succeed over time. I'm excited to see that part.
And the key is over time here, right? So one of the things that I'm going to do all season long is the expectations game. I will say this, right? The shareholders and a lot of the shareholders who've seen a lot of football that I talked to, they did say that we were further ahead than we expected. And Scott Frost actually mentioned privately to a few of them that we had more talent on the field than he was expecting as well. So, again, to me, that ceiling right now, where I'm at right now is, and again, I don't know what that roster is going to look like after the spring because we have another portal opportunity that's going to be coming up. But to me, it looks more like trending towards the 6-6 team and not the 4-8 team that we saw. All right, Alan, you had here in the notes, and I had it as well. I'd like to hear your take on Sean Beckton's interview, right? So you said really good interview in the notes. So that was all the notes we got on that. But I'd like to hear from you because I've kind of been talking about it a little bit. I'd like to hear what stood out to you with Sean Beckton's interview and why you thought it was a really good interview.
Yeah, I just thought he was very just authentic in the interview. I mean, we see, especially in the Malzahn era, how much there was just coach speak. And we know that, every coach to some degree is going to give coach speak. But, Beck isn't the head coach. I think there's obviously less, media attention on a assistant coach. And I know he's the associate head coach, but just in general. I just thought it was a really, really authentic and real interview. I liked what he talked about specifically when it came to the wide receivers, and talked about how he showed old tape to the current wide receiver room of, legendary UCF receivers that he coached, whether it was, Speedy Hall or JJ Wharton, Brashad Perriman, these guys that,
The
for a
Fiesta
long
Bowl,
time.
he talked specifically with Speedy Hall about the Fiesta Bowl and how his blocking made a big difference in that win.
That's right. He did. He talked about the blocking. I mean, he just talked about how wide receivers, how they were developed and trained and at UCF, and what kind of pride they took in their gig. I mean, even guys like Josh Reese and Taylor Oldham that, were more blocking wide receivers, but they played a really big role. They may have not had the flashiest stats, but, he talked about how the room is, young right now with guys like Bridgewater and Richardson, who you mentioned, and Day Farmer, and, talked about the importance of really just kind of getting UCF back to what we're used to a wide receiver. I think wide receiver and DB, I've said this a million times on the show, but those were two positions we could always count on as being usually the strongest positions on the field, and usually the guys that were going to go pro. Now we're still seeing that, guys like Kobe, and, there's been recent, guys that have gone pro for us. And this year, it looks like the guys that are going to go pro outside of RJ are both DB and wide receiver. But it just, the depth and the talent, or, whatever you want to say, whether it was Gus or being run first or whatever, but in general, it just has not been as strong. I think we can all see that. So I think he's really putting a precedent on, bringing that back to UCF. And I think showing the old tape of receivers was really cool. And where he talked about how he talked about Burdell Richardson, but he talked about like Wade and Charles and Carl Jenkins Jr., talked about the talent that they have. And I like that he also talked about, the leaders that are already starting to form at UCF. I mean, that was one thing before we brought in some of these transfers. UCF didn't have a single receiver on the field that played any minutes in college football at all. Literally not one single player, wide receiver that was on the roster until they brought in like Dwayne Thomas and Marcus Burke from Florida and DJ Black from Limestone. And he's talked about that those three older kind of portal players, he's been very happy that they've been vocal in the meetings. They have a lot of personality, and they're kind of really coaching up the younger guys. And I think, Trey's talked about this. Other alumni have talked about how they haven't seen leaders on the field. They haven't seen vocal. They haven't seen guys stepping up when UCF may be losing in a game. So to already hear that some of these transfers are taking pride in the wide receiver room was really, really good to see. And he also, I think, talked about, just that he is seeing, talent, and that he's surprised with what he's seen. I think, kind of like you alluded to, that Frost had said that there's more talent than initially expected. And I think Beck is seeing the same thing with some of these receivers. They're raw. They haven't played a lot, but they got potential. So I think it was a really good interview to hear about the wide receiver, because I think that's one of the more interesting position groups and position battles going into next year. Because at this point, really not a single wide receiver that's on the roster has played any sort of significant minutes for UCF. So all these guys are essentially new to us, whether they're transfers, whether they're freshmen, or they're returning guys like Burdell and Bridgewater. But it's going to be really interesting to see who are the 3, maybe 4 guys that step up, and to kind of get some insight on that. I thought it was really interesting.
Well, I think also to your point, a couple of points actually I kind of want to reinforce. Josh Reese, if you guys don't remember,
he was a beast blocker,
4-star out of Miami Central, right? And the 4-star at that time in 2010, yes, it was post Liberty Bowl. Actually, he signed in 2009, I think. So we hadn't hit the Liberty Bowl yet, right? But this was a 4-star receiver from Miami Central, right? Mm-hmm. And David Kelly, by the way, remember how he used to be one of our recruiters down in Miami? David Kelly brought him in. He was the guy that, from a recruiting perspective, right, you expected, if he was in Gus's system now, the no block, no rock wouldn't have registered with him, right? but he was one of the guys that were specifically pointed out as these fundamentals are what make you a successful football player and ultimately a good UCF player. The other thing is all of the coaches, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but we've gotten more access and more content out of UCF's media team and interviews than we've had at all in the past under Gus Malzahn. And there's a lot less coach speak going around, whether it's Scott Frost or anybody else. But I think that Scott Frost is trying to highlight his team and also a lot more of the players than we've seen in the past. And I think that's a good thing too, because you reward those players that have and give them that voice. And guys like DJ Black who are doing well, who are performing well, who are giving the effort, who are becoming the leaders. They're the ones that are being highlighted. And I think that's absolutely what you need going forward. All right. That being said, let's go ahead and Josh, did you have anything else? I'm sorry, man. Last but not least.
No. I dropped that. All I'll say is this. The fact that I'll say the 30s and 40-year-olds, we still know Renell Hall. We still know Josh Reese. We're talking about this in 2025. That's the difference between, and I don't know if a lot of the nil era players are going to see this, but when you do your job and do it well, and maybe you don't get the numbers you want, but you are so good that you're remembered a decade plus later for what you do on the field, that is perhaps lost on what's going on within nil and everything else here. And that's, while that is both sad and an opportunity to show how you can make more money with us or in future destinations, because some of these little things we're talking about just don't always show up as much as they did in the past.
This is exactly, those particulars and those fundamentals are exactly why the 2 stars, 3 stars, and 4 stars at UCF under George O'Leary and subsequent coaches made it to the NFL, right? Yeah. Because they knew how to speak the language. They knew how to read a offense or a defense, and they had the ability in the techniques, which is what separates you from, in college, a lot of it is you're being able to out athlete someone, right? And that's why the 4 stars and 5 stars have a higher percentage of there's less of them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In the country. So they're at a higher percentage, but the vast majority of the NFL is 3 stars. Those that make it, the reason they make it is because they put in the extra effort and they focused on the fundamentals, and that's why those guys got picked up. Renell Hall being one of them, by the way. He played in the NFL as well.
Yeah.
So there's a reason why the Jacksonville Jaguars pick up UCF players every year, right? They are de-incentivized to do that by the system right now with NIL, and I think that's one of the problems with it. But, I do. And exactly. Yeah. And I do think that that's the culture that they're trying to build and why you're seeing the types of recruits that we're trying to recruit now. So it'll be interesting to see what those stalwarts are for a class later on, but they don't care about the stars. They don't care about the recruiting rankings, which kind of sucks as a UCF fan because we've got all this noise about it. Right. But I don't want to be the Miami of the state of Florida.
Yeah. We're 4-8. All the 4 5 stars, 4 stars, and all that got us 4 and 8. But it got us Frost back, which could be a blessing in disguise.
There you go.
All right. Let's go ahead and
not pivot.
Pivot. What did we say last week? Was it what was the suggestion? Transition?
Rotate. I don't know.
Rotate. Yeah, let's rotate to the pivot pole.
There you go.
There we go. We're going to rotate to the pivot pole. So we asked you this week, would you swivel. That's right. Swivel. That's right. Swivel to the pivot pole. And last week we asked you all, do we make it to the second round of the crown? So that's interesting to see whether we make it past the second round of the crown. So 40% of you said yes. That means 60% of you said no. Yeah. So I tend to be on the 60%, but I'd like to get your guys' live reactions. Alan Levin, do we make it?
I don't know much about Oregon State. I mean,
Well, that's
what
good
conference?
because I'm going to preview them in just a bit. So
Yeah, I mean,
okay,
they're
good.
in the WCC this year, West Coast Conference, right? I did see that we are favored by 5.5 as the most recently when I checked. So we are favored. I always feel like we're good enough to win one game. And I feel like just like we won a game in the conference tournament, just like we won a game in the NIT last year. Yes, I do think now the question is who's playing. That's where I need to know who's playing. I mean, is Keyshawn Hall going to play? I mean, I know we're going to
No.
talk about
No.
so no
No,
Keyshawn Hall, no Sellers. I'm assuming obviously Darius is playing and some of our other starters, but
You're
Keyshawn
actually
Hall.
kind of taking away my thing here. So let's
Okay, well, I'm going to say we win one game just to answer. We win one game.
All right. So if we beat the Beavs, if we slay the Beavs, then more than likely we're going to be playing the BKitten again.
Yes, it's so unfair. Yeah, this is why. So I'll steal. I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder, Roger, because I didn't check that area of the notes. I have a very specific area of our show notes that I do, which all of you should know if you've listened to the show before. Here's the problem. Oregon State swivel. Oregon State has, I think they had 3 or 4 of their starters not playing.
Three.
Three. So this is kind of like, who knows? It's like one of these. I don't know if Nils, I think, is traveling. Is he playing? I don't know. I feel like I agree with Alan. We're going to win one game, and inevitably, like baseball, we're going to lose to Cincinnati again.
Ouch, dude! That's another thing that we're going to be talking about later. Like, seriously, what is wrong with you?
It's an hour in. Let's get to it.
All right. Let's go ahead and talk about some UCF hoops then. Okay, as you guys have both alluded to, we have an update this week. There are 8 UCF players in the portal at this very moment. So, we hemmed and hawed and talked a little last week about do they matter? Who's in the portal? Well, the newest member of the portal that is important for us this year is Keyshawn Hall. So just so everybody understands, we have Keyshawn Hall. JJ Taylor also put his name in the ring. Cameron Simpson. Okay. Rokas.
Okay.
Tyler Hendricks. I'm still a little sad about that one.
Yeah.
Jalen Sellers, obviously sad about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Niels Mahoski, he's in the portal. Mikey Williams is in the portal. So that is our 8 that are in the portal. So who does that leave? That leaves Jordan Ivy Curry, so Juice. That leaves Darius Johnson as available to play. That leaves Benny Williams as available to play. That leaves Debo Coleman available to play. And based on this season, he will probably get a start. Dior Johnson. We never saw this guy play, but Elijah Hulsiwi, and that's why I'm going to say it that way because we didn't see him play. Cameron Simpson, freshman guard from Oak Ridge. I'd actually be interested to see him play. Pupa. And then Mustafa, right? So look, I did some research on Oregon State, and never ever would I do research on Oregon State because they're not in the Pac-12 anymore, and quite frankly, they haven't done anything in basketball. They're a great baseball program, not a good basketball program.
Yeah,
they are 20-12. However, when, as you said, they're in the WCC. They have lost every single game that has been against a team with a pulse, whether that be a Power 4 program or Power. What would it be like now? Is it 6 because the ACC only got one in with Duke, largely on the back of Cooper Flag, or not? But we were talking about their wins come from Utah Tech, Weber State, Cal Fullerton. They lost to Oregon. They are beating UC Irvine, which typically has a good basketball program, so that's a good one. Idaho, Sacramento State, Charleston, lost against Nebraska. Again, they won against Gonzaga. Now, that was an interesting one. They won 97-89. But to your point, and I won't go through all of these, but to your point, the thing about Oregon State is that they don't have a lot of depth. I've gone back and looked through their bench, and I've looked through their performance, and they don't have a lot of depth at all.
And they've lost 3 starters.
And they've lost starters, right? So if we go back and go back and look at who's in the portal, Keyshawn Hall is not playing. In fact, Keyshawn Hall was on the phone on Twitter with Kansas, erased his, hey, I'm sorry, Night Nation, that we screwed this up tweet and that we support Johnny Dawkins. And his tweet today was, hey, I had a great conversation with Kansas. I want to be on a team that has the chance to win.
Okay.
I don't have, I have never once as many times as I've transferred. Hey, maybe that's part of the reason.
Yeah.
I've never been on a team that's made it to the NCAA tournament. Johnny Dawkins, wink, wink, wink. I want to be on a team that can make it to the Final Four. Okay, so let me say a few things about that.
Ooh.
Keyshawn Hall, I don't hate you, bro. Rumors are 2.5 and strong rumors, $2.5 million for Keyshawn Hall. UCF is not paying $2.5 million for Keyshawn Hall. Number one. Number two, Keyshawn Hall was a great scorer for UCF, led the Big 12. Okay. Great scorer. Can't take anything away from him. His turnovers were abysmal. Almost very close to being the top turnover machine at UCF. There's no reason why he had to tweet that out today. Absolutely none. So Keyshawn Hall, I'm not hating on you for taking $2.5 million or even chasing someone who's doing that. If someone offers me $2.5 million, I drop everything right now for a year, right? For a year.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop everything right now, go do whatever that is and get it done. Not Fatal Attraction level, right? But like legitimately, if someone offers me to go do a job for $2.5 million for a year, I don't care. Like as much as I love UCF, I'll still wear it under my shirt. I don't care. I'll go do and do whatever I need to do to get that done. However, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Don't, especially after you do this song and dance and Twitter and everywhere else about UCF and wanting to be there for Johnny Dawkins and I'm sorry, Night Nation and all that stuff. Dude, I get it. Next year's program is going to be a cluster. And I blame part of this on Terry Mahajer. You have shown no vision for next year. And Keyshawn Hall is a junior. Go get a bag. Just do it in a classy way.
Yeah.
Right?
So, Keyshawn.
Yeah.
Look here. Keyshawn. If you had worked within the scheme that Dawkins had for defense,
or not turn the ball over late multiple times,
you would have made the NCAA tournament this year. And it's not just you. We all see it. Juice needs to get on board. Other people need to get on board. I'll put my Ben Stout hat on. The difference between UCF making the NCAA tournament this year and not was not your amazing amount of scoring, and that was good. It was you dribbling the ball off your knee multiple times, going into 3 defenders.
Exactly. And that's where I'm going to put, and again, this is not to throw shade at Keyshawn, but at the end of the day, to your point, I'm not sure he didn't take more away from UCF's team because of the lack of ball movement and going ISO ball and being able to do what he needs to do. And I don't know how much of that is on Coach Dawkins. I think a lot of that is
Fair
on
too.
Coach Dawkins, right? I mean, it goes back to Green. What did he say? If you got the hot hand, you got the green light to shoot from anywhere. I don't care. That's not the coach that I want. I want a coach with a system offensively. All right.
Yeah.
And I hate that Ben's not here because
He
yes,
probably
he's on our side now with the Dawkins thing. But when we were
Yeah.
talking about last week, do you spend the money now, right, and take that away from the NIL and get rid of Dawkins this year? To me, 100% you do. All right, go ahead. Sorry, Josh. That's
But that's what I'm saying. That's the thing, Keyshawn. I don't know if it's not your fault, but I don't know if there's so much complexity we don't see here. But you can't say those things and omit the other statistics in your, you had a good year, but there's a lot of other statistics that are probably part of the reason there. You can't drop 40 and have 8 turnovers. Like it's right. It's just weird dichotomy. So please go to a team that will cover up these things or play a little more defense.
if he goes to Kansas, he's gonna ride the pine.
I think we'll see. Arkansas might have a shot. I saw that was
Arkansas does have a shot at him. Yeah,
and I think that might not be too bad for him.
I honestly, I'd rather him go to Arkansas than to go to Kansas for him, not just for us.
Yeah, I agree.
I think for him, he's got a better shot there than he does playing for Kansas, because he will ride the pine. He will be coming off the bench at Kansas. He will not be a starter at Kansas. He may be a starter. He will probably be a starter at Arkansas. So I do think that, but then again, who's the coach at Arkansas?
Calipari.
Exactly. And what's Calipari going to do?
I don't know. He's just going to play whoever is going to get him into the Sweet 16 again.
Yeah, he's going to play. He's going to play the players with the most talent, right? So if you've got a coach like Coach Calipari and an SEC NIL, we'll see where Keyshawn Hall stacks up there. But he's not going to get playing time just playing, just running ISO ball. That being said, going back to what I originally started this conversation about, which was who do we have left? We have Jordan Ivy Curry. I hate that Mikey Williams is gone, to be honest with you, because I think he was a spark plug on offense and he was getting better. JJ Taylor was so hot and cold. He's one of those guys that can push you over the edge one game out of 5. So if we've got Juice, we've got DJ, we've got Benny, we've got Dior. Debo is good for defense. He's going to start. I don't like him starting, but whatever. He's going to start. And you've got Mustafa Chim. I think they win the first game because Oregon State doesn't have a lot of depth and based on who they played. I also think that they beat them because we've got basically 5 people out there as starters. So unless we completely collapse defensively, I think we win this game. But I don't think we beat Cincinnati. I think the Bear Kittens unfortunately get their way. And I think, with Mikey Williams gone, JJ Taylor gone, Keyshawn Hall gone, Jalen Sellers gone. Niels was playing a little bit better, but he was never going to be a difference maker. Rokas, not really going to make a difference one way or the other. I just don't think we have the depth to make a run in the crowd. I hope I'm wrong. They had a chance to heal up. We'll see. DJ was playing insane the last 2 or 3 games. So I think we have a chance. Obviously against Oregon State, I think we win that game. I don't know about the Bear Kittens. I think, and truthfully, I don't know how many of the Bearcats are coming back versus the 5 starters that they put on the floor last game. So watch tomorrow's game no matter what. All right. Alan, did you have anything else to add to that sport that you sometimes watch?
I mean, pretty much what you guys said, but yeah, it's tough. Keyshawn Hall. I mean, yeah, I think he was part of our defensive liability, but you can't hate on the offense. And obviously it's a team sport. he's not the only reason we didn't make the tourney. But yeah, I agree. I think we can get past Oregon State, the Beavs, but it's going to be tough to advance much further than that. We were already kind of limited offensively, even with Keyshawn. So without him, I don't know, maybe we play more as a team, more as a unit, and we win with, I don't know. It does not feel like we're going to get too far. So, hey, we get one more game of UCF basketball, though, something to watch before we get into the boring summer months when there's no fun sports on. So,
for you,
For you.
for you,
sorry, for
let's be
me,
clear.
no basketball, no football. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
All right, let's go ahead and swivel yet again. No,
Is that it? Is that the swivel? Is that the swivel? Or the wrap it up?
I don't know. The swivel. I guess Alan is not participating in the swivel.
I'll say pivot and pivot only.
Are we having a pivot revolution right now? Is that what's happening?
Maybe.
Okay. All right. We'll have to talk about it next week. So tune in next week for our pivot revolution. Let's talk a little UCF baseball. So hot start for UCF baseball. I was at the game for Houston. I was super excited when we won. UCF baseball is now 17-10, 3-6 in Big 12 play. 3-6. We dropped one to Jacksonville, 3-2. Then we lose to Cincinnati as well. I know that Alan put swept on here, but I don't want to say that. So we lose to Cincinnati. We've lost 5 straight games. We play tomorrow against Stetson. Okay. Or stepson, as some of us like to call them. No shade to Stetson. They were a rival of ours for a long time, and that's pre the Cows, which is why we call them that. That being said, let's talk a little UCF baseball. Okay. Our pitching staff, I don't know if people are hurt or what's going on, but our pitching staff is just not performing at the same level. And I'm not just talking about because it's a step up in the competition with the Big 12. They just aren't. I don't know if hitters have figured them out. Pitching is always going to be ahead of hitting. But they're just not there. The defense has been great. You hear Ben talk about Jimenez, but Jimenez has been good. The entire defense has been pretty good, except for some of the outfielders have been a little questionable. But even they have made some great plays. The pitching just has not lived up to the expectation. I think also, especially in this last game against Cincinnati, I love Rich Wallace. I think he's the right guy. Some of the guys from the pitching coach's perspective of when we put who in has been interesting on some of those decisions. I think that Castellanos has been batted around the ballpark a little bit more, and it's made us hesitant. I don't know if he's injured or not, but he has not been performing, and he wasn't put in when I would have expected him to be this last series. So it's interesting. I don't know how many of our guys have injuries and not. One of the questions that we asked Rich Wallace at the beginning was why one of the things that we saw UCF baseball from the pitching perspective is that we saw a lot of injuries fairly early in the season, which limited our pitching staff. I do think we have a better pitching staff than we did the last few years. I do think we have better talent on this UCF baseball team than we've had in the last few years, whether it be from a hitting, pitching, defense. But last year's team made it to a regional. Last year's team won 2 games in a regional. And it's early on in the season. I don't know what's going on with UCF right now, but they're in a funk. From a hitting perspective, some positives that I saw from the series this past weekend. We started hitting homers again. For a while there, our bats got quiet. We didn't hit homers. Braden Calise is hitting a lot of choppers into the ground and in positions where defenses have gobbled him up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with UCF. I still have, and I hate to say this, hope is not an option. I still have a lot of it, despite losing the last two series and losing against Jacksonville 3-2. That was a byproduct of the hitting, not the pitching. So the pitching staff has still done well in a lot of these close losses. What's been the difference makers in these games lately has been we have gotten hits in the 8th and the 9th inning, right? But the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning, we've not been as productive as what we've have been in the past. Our small ball hasn't been as good. We left a lot of batters on base, or a lot of runners on base, right? 8, numbers like 8, 9, you're not going to win a lot of games. In this last game, if you walk and hit by pitch 8 batters in a row, you're not going to win a lot of games. So the pitching staff needs to clean it up. The hitters, I saw some signs of life over this past series. I think we need to be better about what picking and choosing what we're going after. I think our defense is solid. If our hitting can continue the progress that we've seen over the past couple weekends, I think that we'll be back into it. So don't be surprised if UCF baseball, I know we're all down right now with regard to UCF baseball, but don't be surprised if they don't pick it back up. And if anybody can do it, I think it's Rich Wallace. So 3-6 in the Big 12 play right now. So 2 of the most underrated or lower level teams that we played early on. But I do think they get their swag back and they get their groove back. Like, for those of us that are 43, Stella got her groove back. I think UCF baseball gets their groove back and starts winning again. Let's see how they do against Stetson. It's really hard to – every game has gone down to the 8th or the 9th inning, and 2 of those games against Cincinnati were walk-offs. So I saw progress. Let's keep going. Let's keep making sure that we're supporting the team, because I think that they will they'll figure it out, in my opinion, and I think they'll be a better team for it in the long run. All right. That being said, let's swill again and let's talk a little bit about some listener love. There are several of you that have started following us on YouTube from last week. You've set your privacy settings to private, so I can't shout you out, but thank you for following us. Make sure that you're following, liking, subscribing, sharing our content, the pivot poll, everything else. The more people that are on there, the better, to continue the conversation as far as UCF is concerned. All right. That being said, let's swivel again to Alan's oxymoronic stat of the week. Alan, take it away, my friend.
I'm going to be honest, I don't have one this week.
What?
Yep. I
For those of you that are listening, because I know there's a lot of you
pull one out of your head. That's like your brain is so full of statistics that just doesn't love improv and poof. Wow.
I know.
All right. Okay.
Shocking.
I'm really disappointed, Alan. Super disappointed.
He was ill last week. Give him a little bit.
As Tim says, oh, the horror. The horror, my friend. I'm just telling you. It's just I don't know. I'm speechless. All right. Since Alan does not have that stat for us, his oxymoronic stat of the week, let's talk about Josh's sometimes funny fact of the week. Josh, you have something for us this week.
Actually, Alan's not no, I wouldn't do that. Of course I have something.
It's like shade being thrown there at Alan.
Listen, I'll be honest, mine's a little easier than Alan's stuff, and I'm also pretty good at improv too, but this one I actually had to look up. So while we might not have the money, we still own Stetson. That is a popular sign at most rowdy nights held in DeLand when we were playing them in basketball in the 90s and early aughts. But we just talked about playing them in baseball, and both teams have actually put a good amount of players in the MLB since 1980. I have a couple questions, since we all have a few people here. Tim, other people in the chat, feel free to play. Who has more players in the MLB since the stats were available that I had access to, called the 80s or late 70s, UCF or Stetson.
Ooh, Tim, why don't you become call in and tell us
Thank you,
what your
caller.
thoughts are. I'm gonna say. Oh, Tim says Stetson. I agree with him. I think Stetson has more. What do you think, Alan?
I think Stetson also. Feels like that's
Okay.
where this is going.
Let me ask you another question, and then I'll answer your question. Who had more first-round draft picks, UCF or Stetson?
UCF.
Alan?
Tim? Go ahead, Alan. That doesn't preclude you from...
I said UCF.
And Tim has Stetson as well. So would you be shocked to know that UCF and Stetson have a tied amount of players in the MLB since the late 70s? I'll ask you for how many players in a second. Maybe we'll start that in the chat too. But you, the TK1 crew is correct. UCF has more number one first round draft picks, all the way back from Chad Mulata to well, no, I won't say relatively recently, but
Mulata or Matola?
Matola, Mulata, whatever. Sorry.
No, there's a big difference between Chad and Matola. I mean, he had a pretty good MLB career. I'm just saying.
Now I have to go to my stats from thebaseballcube.com.
And by the way, his son currently is on the UCF baseball team.
That's true. So we're talking Chad Joe Wagner, Justin Pope, Matt Fox, Nate Pearson, all number ones, and Stetson has only had 2 or 3. Kevin Nicholson, Brad Snyder, Logan Gilbert recently with the Mariners, who I think is going to at some point potentially light it up within has been lighting it up for about 4 years. Amazingly, Jacob deGrom was a 9th round draft pick for Stetson, and a name you all know. So number ones go to UCF. Number of players since since 78, tied at the number of what? Since I have a little more time because Alan didn't know.
Hold on, number of one. Hold on,
number of picks since 78 that we and Stetson both have. There's the equal number.
I don't know, man. What about you? Didn't mention D in there, or he was at the baseball game against Houston. I know that he played MLB, so I think that number might be off. Tim says, how many UCF baseball players are currently in the minors? I guess he answered his own question. He said 12. Thanks, Tim. Maybe we should give you a segment since Alan.
Wait, yeah, I'm doing it now. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe. So, all right, for my so okay, so let me rephrase. I'm looking at top picks based off of the baseballcube.com. I gotta look at all picks now. Damn it. I didn't scroll down. Yeah, you're right. It's UCF. Damn it. It's UCF.
Hey, we're a clean show. We don't say those kind of things around here.
Yeah. So I was looking at the top picks and they were all 30, and that's why I thought it was a cool thing. My apologies. Sorry from the Baseball Cube. Yeah, we have about 132 since about the 80s, and they have 88.
Yeah, it's interesting. Think about some of these names as far as UCF baseball and the MLB. Chad Matola, Mike Murth, Drew Butera. And you think about that. That's a big name in MLB baseball. Darnell Sweeney. Eric Skoglund. I don't know if you guys remember. He's fairly recent. 2012 to 2014. He made his debut in 2017. Ben Lively was here from 2011 to 2013. If you're following our Twitter, he actually opened up the season. He was a starting pitcher for Cleveland and got the W, by the way, this season for Cleveland. He went to the league in 2017. Chasen Bradford, I don't remember him. Bo Taylor, Dylan Moore got the call up in 2019. And Thaddeus Ward, I remember Thaddeus in 2023. So we've got a fairly good history. And the reason I'm saying that's not all of the guys, by the way, but the guys that should ring a bell for you: Chad Matola, Mike Maruth, Drew Butera, obviously, Darnell Sweeney, Dan Winkler, by the way, those of you that don't remember him, Ben Lively, Dylan Moore, and Thaddeus Ward. Those should all still ring a bell for you. And those are fairly recent guys. Now, what's crazy to me is nobody who's played past the 2018 season has made it to the league.
2018, really? Now I need to. I'm looking. Oh wow, yeah. Since wow. Alex Freeland is in AAA. So is Jackson Clare and Colton Gordon. But yeah, like we're not. Wow, damn.
Josh, we're a clean show. Quit it.
We're E for everyone.
E for everyone, but unless we're talking about dams whose water have broke, we can't say that word.
I'm talking about building beavers. These are pitchers stacking up wood and building,
Okay, so we're going off the rails. All right, let's go ahead and swivel yet again.
I want to do this now. I like this.
All right. Well, you can, absolutely. So we're swiveling again to the quick update on other UCF sports that Alan does not watch. So this is definitely not the doom and gloom section. So go ahead, Josh.
It's not. Okay. So there is some doom and gloom. But let's start with. You think it's doom and gloom because we had baseball. We already talked about that. We think we will be out of the crown by the end of the weekend or week. Let's talk about women's tennis. They got 2 dubs. They could be Cincinnati. They beat them 4-1 and West Virginia 4-0, both at home. We have that West Virginia game was the penultimate home game. The last home game of the year is on Saturday, April 4th. That other month that starts with an A. Actually, April 5th. I confuzzled that whole thing. Still at 12 p.m. They love the games at 12 p.m. That's versus Houston. We have a Utah road trip coming up in about a week. Number 11 men's tennis was on a break since we had pivot. 16-6 still in the year. They're going to host Baylor, number 17 Baylor, in a few days from this being live on April 3rd at the USTA National Campus, and then number 32 Arizona State on April 6th, also at Lake Nona at the USTA National Campus. There's 2 more mid-April road games, and again, Big 12 Championship is coming up in a few weeks, the 18th to 20th in Joanna Gainesland, Waco, Texas. We also have softball. That was a bit of a womp, but not. It's really weird. They're 22-16-1. After they smoked UF midweek, number 3 UF midweek, 4-0, and then lost the series to Baylor to follow it up 0-1, 2-3, and they won 7-2 to avoid the sweep at the end. And of course, up next, like we talked about last week, the next game is against number 1 Oklahoma. So hopefully we don't get run ruled because they do that a lot these days. They've only lost. We talked about that last week.
Let me pause you there for a second. We haven't used the pause in a while.
Sure.
So you said kind of freaky or whatever, right? UF is number 3. They won 4-0. It's because we have great talent in the circle and the hitters haven't caught up yet. However,
you're right.
Game against UF, we had 2 home runs, right? So Aubrey Evans and those players are starting to catch up.
Yeah.
And like I told you at the very beginning when we started talking about this, like last week and the week before, this team is going to move in fits and starts.
Yeah.
And that's because we have a very young team that is going to have to catch up on the hitting relative to who they're playing this season. So, okay, go ahead, Josh.
Okay, no problem. And I tend to agree with you there. Still, we get to play Oklahoma twice, and St. Thomas, that's in Minnesota, St. Thomas, all in Norman, and the Okana Invitational this coming week. So if we win
I thought you were
two,
going to say St. Thomas Aquinas, and I'm like,
no,
we're
that's why I
playing
had
high school teams now. Is that really what we're
I
doing?
had it's St. Thomas, Perens, Minnesota, in Norman, and if we win 2 games this coming week, there better be shouting from the rooftops. Now, I need to follow this up because a new sport that Alan absolutely doesn't watch, and to be frank, I actually don't mind watching it when it's on TV, but usually I only see it when it's on the Olympics. Rowing. Yes, rowing. Number 25 rowing has swept the Sarasota 2K to win the Benderson Cup. They were a perfect 5 for 5 on first place finishes in grand finals last weekend. The first 4, and it's a plus because there's the Cox in there, because all of you know rowing language, right? They beat number 19 UNC. The second 8 beat number 18 Alabama and number 19 UNC. The first 8 beat UNC, Michigan State, Iowa, Miami, and Dartmouth. And that's after they took 5 of 6 versus Jacksonville in Orlando on March 14th, which was their first actual non-scrimmage meet. So why not? Up next is the Rocky Top Invitational, or rather Rocky Top Invite, this weekend on April 4th and 5th in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So if you're up there, feel free to check out our number 25 rowing team. That's all I got.
In Oak Ridge. Okay. So avoid the nuclear power plant up there. I'm just saying. That being said, I do want to mention this. Rowing has been a consistent
Yeah.
top conference winning team.
Yes.
Right. And they have also been ranked in the past. They had some, shall we say, interesting things happen with the rowing team recently with the coaching staff.
Yes.
That being said, rowing has been consistently a winner, so make sure you're following them. Also, something that you didn't mention on here on the quick update on other UCF sports that Alan does not watch. Volleyball played a scrimmage against UF and won against a pretty. They're going to be a ranked UF team. So for those of you that have not followed volleyball, we said goodbye to Jenny Maurer last year, longtime protege of Todd Dagenet, someone who was involved for the program for over a decade, right? I won't say decades because she's still pretty young, but over a decade, and was the heart of our recruiting efforts, and a great person, good coach. We decided to make a change. We brought in some top talent, some top coaching talent into the coaching sphere for UCF volleyball. Their serving is much better. Their basically every single statistic has gone up. I don't necessarily, we talked about it last year, Coach Maurer, I don't think got a fair shake as far as how long she was there. That being said, we brought, to Terry's credit, we brought a great coach in for UCF volleyball, and it's already starting to show dividends because we did bring some top talent in last year and this year as far as UCF volleyball. So keep an eye on UCF volleyball. We're used to winning the AAC. We're used to being competitive in the NCAAs. And I think this volleyball team may surprise some people this year, and this program will surprise some people in the years to come. So I just wanted to mention that we did beat UF. UF is expected to be really good and ranked this year. So that is a solid W for the ladies of volleyball. All right. Other than that, I've kind of had I kind of like held back as far as this question because I'm going to put it out as a poll. But what I would like for Night Nation to think about and to participate in the poll, and we'll put that out as soon as the podcast hits, which will be Wednesday, hopefully Thursday at the latest, is I'll put a poll out there. I want to know from you guys, we have made fun of P5 programs for a really long time. and talked about how UCF would not be mediocre in the P5. So I want to ask the question of Night Nation, and I'll ask the question of you guys as well, is where UCF is right now, and I do firmly believe that UCF will overcome this. Are we a mediocre P5 program because of the revenue sports and where they are today? So that's going to be the question for this week's poll. I'll put that out there for you guys. Make sure you're participating. If you haven't followed us on Twitter, make sure you're doing it. That's where the poll will be. And put your feedback on there. We're extremely interested in that. Shout out to Tim again this week. We appreciate you, brother, and making sure that you're giving me all the hat suggestions and the feedback on all the other things that we're doing. Thank you everyone for following, liking, subscribing. Tell your friends. Go Knights and
Charge on.
Alan.
Oh, he said it, but he was
Alan's muted because his keyboard.